Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode. This is episode number 67. Sorry for the delay with there not being an episode last week, but things happen. But on today's episode, we have Chay Brown from Trans Actual joining us to discuss. And I want to make a note here that if this is too heavy for you, then do please miss this one and look after yourself, look after your mental health. That's first and foremost. But as you have already heard or seen, we are going to discuss the recent UK Supreme Court ruling, which is a complete fucking shit show. Um, so yeah, so buckle up. And yeah, so first of all, how have you been feeling?
I've been feeling busy. Um,
Yeah,
been feeling very busy. Um, Angry. I've gone through several feelings. Sort of on the day the Supreme Court ruling was announced, sort of shocked, confused. Didn't really struggling to sort of understand what it meant for us all. Um, since since then, sort of my anger and seeing how people are being impacted, how the ruling is being willfully misinterpreted and misused, and all of that, sort of angry not just for myself but for our communities
yeah,
who've already gone through so much.
yeah. It's like um, I was just scrolling on Twitter, um, and I ran into that myself with the confusion. Like the I was dealing with someone who was like obviously misleading, misinterpreting the ruling, you know, and all of that. So yeah, it's yeah, when I mean me and my co-host Max. I think it was either earlier on in the year, or it might have been the latter end of last year when we first heard about the possibility of this going to the UK Supreme Court. We shared our feelings then. I was hopeful, and I think I remember saying that I don't see it happening. Egg on my face because it did. Um, but yeah, it's I know it primarily it focused on trans women, but I know it again for some unknown reason trans men get overlooked, and it's like so. I'm assuming after a few days, after calming down, not being as obviously rightly angry. Um, what is the outlook now in term from where you are in terms of going forward?
We're still working to understand things because there's so there are a few ways this ruling could be sort of understood, and um, the law is a very complex thing. So sort of different lawyers have got slightly different understandings of the really subtle bits. Um, so one of the things that sort of would impact trans men is sort of you know we apparently can be excluded from men's spaces, yes, but also women's spaces. So or you know, transmasculine people. And the bit that we're still trying to work to understand is there's always been a bit in the Equality Act that says trans people can be excluded from single sex spaces if it's a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. What we're trying to understand is how much this ruling impacts this. So is it the people that proportionate means of a legitimate aim still applies to excluding us, or is it saying that I, as a trans man, must be excluded from the men's toilets and could be excluded from the women's toilets if it was a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim? Not that I'd be wanting to go in the women's toilets anyway.
No.
So there's still bits that we're trying to understand, even a couple of weeks later, because it is that complicated. But something that we're doing at Transactual, we're working on a resource, and we've got one of our lawyers looking at it at the moment. That's for trans people on what are my rights at the moment. To help people understand that, and to at least take some of that uncertainty, and what you can do or say if someone does challenge you, going into the changing rooms at the local leisure centre. So we've got that coming in, and today we've launched a tool where if someone's told no, you can't wee here, or if someone's workplace, as we're seeing a few workplaces doing now, changes their policy on where trans staff can go to the loo or what changing rooms they can use and things like that. We've got now a tool on our website where people can let us know about it, and if they want pointing in the direction of some legal advice, there's a space on the form for them to tell us that as well. But yeah, in terms of being clearer, a little bit clearer, but not a huge amount. It's taking a while to really get to grips with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've encountered that myself. Because as you say, there's a lot of confusion, especially around the law, because it seems to be vague, and obviously each lawyer will have their own interpretation, which is okay. That's how they interpret the law. So you have to try and navigate that. And obviously, I don't know if you saw, but the FA has obviously said that they are going to bar trans women from June 1st. You've got Barclays Bank stopping their trans employees from accessing to, um, the bathroom, which is a basic human right, but okay, apparently not. Um, yeah, when I first when I obviously not first, but when I heard this, maybe it's just me, but I just went back into history because history has a habit of repeating itself, and I just went back to segregation, and that's exactly what's happening now.
Yeah, it is attempts to say that trans people need to be in their own separate facilities. That is segregation, and the frustrating thing as well is you've got the chair of the Equality and Human Rights committee saying or commission, sorry, saying that trans people there should be gender neutral facilities for trans people. Well, actually, we have been asking for gender neutral facilities for non-binary people, and for trans people that don't feel comfortable in the men's or the women's. We've been asking for that for years, and actually, the previous government passed a law to say that toilets in new builds public buildings, that they can't have gender neutral toilets. So there's the saying they constantly contradict themselves, but also we whilst yes we do say that some trans people would be more comfortable in gender neutral toilets and some trans people would be more comfortable on a side room in hospital. We've got to be realistic as well, and also recognize that a lot of us are more comfortable, as trans men in men's hospital wards and using men's toilets, and trans women, using women's toilets and women's hospital wards. And with non-binary people, they don't want to be. Yes, if gender neutral spaces are available for non-binary people, that's great. But where they're not available, they don't want to be forced into a category that doesn't fit them either.
No, it um I have to laugh because otherwise, I'll just completely erupt. Um, like this ruling, um, over the definition of a man or woman, which is really clear in itself by itself anyway, because what is a man and a woman? But anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. Um, Seeing as they completely lack any common sense, it's like by them forcing trans women to enter men's and trans men into women's, which wouldn't work anyway because that's a safety risk in itself, not just for men and women, but also for trans people, non-binary people. It doesn't exactly dissolve the imminent threat of cis men.
Yeah, and the point is, so well, the Supreme Court reckoned they'd got around that by saying trans men couldn't use women's toilets either,
Mm,
getting around the argument, oh, someone could pretend to be a trans man.
yeah,
But actually, assaulting people is illegal already. Assaulting people is illegal. Harassing people is illegal, but it still happens. And
mm,
I think of when did cis men that wanted to assault someone ever stop and ask for permission to go into that
exactly,
space?
exactly.
When Cousins, all he needed was his police badge. Harvey Weinstein, all he needed was a job opportunity for someone, and to make them feel like they had to do what he was saying or go along with it. It's and what's happening is transgender women ultimately are being blamed for the actions of cis men. um and it's bad enough when we all get portrayed as a trans community as dangerous, um because a trans person happened to do something horrid. It's bad enough that, let alone us being not only being held to account to the actions of every single member of our community, but being held to account for the actions of cis men as well.
Yeah,
You
it's like
They need to be held
yeah,
to account, not us.
yeah, it's like this has been and always will be my line on this. All right, cis men, and I always put this in brackets. Not all men, right? It's a fairly logical, common sense thing to say. Apparently, for some, it's not. Right? Cis men, not all men, commit sexual offences. Do they need to dress up? No. I used the case of Adam Graham aka Ida Bryson. Even his own ex-wife said he never wanted to transition. He never wanted to become a woman, right? So again, for anyone out there, because for some reason we have like hate watchers that watch our podcast, a view's a view. So, again, not all men commit sexual offences, right? So I just want to make that very clear. But it's like what I also found very interesting is obviously Miss J.K. Rowling. She donated or contributed £70,000 to For Women in Scotland's um, funds. Which obviously For Women in Scotland raised over 230,000. J.K. Rowling donated 70,000. She could have donated that money to NHS, which could have basically funded abortions for however many months. But instead, she decided to donate it to For Women in Scotland to, to basically make this ruling happen. And it's like, you got to think and you got to wonder, how dangerous are trans people in the first place? That's the first question. And the second question, how much of a destruction do trans people cause to your life? Like really? Are they just a piece of convenience to you? Oh, we could just throw away their livelihood.
Well,
Like,
yeah, I'm not going to comment on any
no, of
individual
course not.
people.
Of
I'm not
course
going
not.
to comment on any individual people, but yeah, what I will say is, Transactional took court case last year against judicial review against the government around the puberty blocker ban. That case cost at least 300,000 pounds.
Mm,
So bear in mind the For Women Scotland case. They had the original hearing, they had an appeal, they had an appeal, they had another appeal. I looked up how much does it cost to run a women's refuge or domestic violence shelter for a year? £100,000. So that just goes to show what the money could have been spent on. And actually, on paper, and it was never about the cause that was on paper, but on paper, this court case was about how many, whether or not trans women would count towards the quota of women that had to be on a public board in Scotland. So the law in Scotland is that the public boards have to be at least 50% women. So this was about whether trans women would count to that 50%. Scottish government amended their guidance to say trans women with a GRC would be included, but the trans women wouldn't be. Right. So I did some sums. There's around 1.7 million women in Scotland, according to the census. According to the census, there's 3,090 trans women. So the first case was about 3,090 hypothetical trans women that could stand to be on a public board. Don't know about you, but I'm not seeing many trans
no,
women on public boards or getting promoted after transitioning. There's exceptions, and well done to them, but people find they have fewer opportunities. But anyway, so of that 3,090, then we look at how many people have got GRC. Again, this is like back of the envelope sort of maths, but 4% of trans people in the UK, more or less, have got a GRC. So for trans women in Scotland, we're talking about 125 people. And again, where are all these women on public, trans women on public boards? So it was never about that, and it was absolutely being used as an opportunity to undermine both the Equality Act and the Gender Recognition Act, and that's unfortunately where we are, and we're going to have a fight on our hands, as not just people that like me that do this is a job, or people involved in organizations, but all of us are going to have a fight in our hands, and also this is not only impacting trans people, sort of, inclusive organizations for lesbian and bi women, inclusive organizations for gay and bi men, and now looking at how is it we can still stay for men but be inclusive of trans men, for example, and also when people are challenged for not looking woman enough going into a woman's space, it's not just trans women that are impacted by that. It's anyone that doesn't conform to white Western standards of femininity. So, butch lesbian women, black and brown women, it's women with polycystic ovary syndrome. It's lots of people. And that's even before you get onto conversations of how are you going to check,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That very famous. No, not famous. Very infamous. Helen Sutherland. Quote. Miss. I'll say it because obviously you can't. So I'll say it. The famous, penis checker wannabe. Her famous quote I must have seen that at least 3 times today. But yeah, it's like I'm almost glad that my co-host couldn't make it because one, her mental health, as I've said, well, her mental health isn't the best. But two, if she was here, I think she would go absolutely nuts and perhaps derailed this a little bit because my co-host is trans. Um, yeah, it's basically turned trans people's lives upside down. Another friend of mine who's trans, she recently started to transition. Um, she completely ignores the news. She doesn't pay attention. She just try. She's just basically living her life. Unfortunately, not a lot of us can do that. You know, even given the massive upheaval that has been going on for the past 2 weeks, even longer. Um, I, I, I just, I am just fed up, and I just want to clarify something, like because um, this will be the first because I'm not trans. I'm a cis man, but for some unknown reason, and this is doing more harm to the trans community, in my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the amount of times I've been misgendered as a trans woman by TERFs is ridiculous. And I do more harm because if they're going along the lines of transvestigation, right? That's not helping anyone. Anyway, but that's a sidebar. So I will put all the links down below, including the recent press statement on transsexual. I think I might include one from the 16th of April upwards to the relevant one, which was on the 26th of April, for everyone to read. But it's like, what is? Let's do a little forecast if we can. What do you foresee in the next 6 to 12 months heading into the new year?
Lots of court cases. I was at a conference yesterday talking to someone that works in the NHS, and I said, we very much want to work with, public service providers, employers to get things right. But if, at the same time, if a trans person is treated unfairly, we'll be encouraging them to take legal action. And a lot of money, there are a couple of legal funds now being set up to support people in taking court cases. So I'm expecting lots of court cases from trans people. If any guidance comes out that we have concerns around and could cause harm to trans people, there'll be legal challenges around that, not necessarily from Transactual, but there'll be legal challenges, and also there will be legal challenges from the people campaigning against trans people's safety, dignity, and inclusion. So now that the Supreme Court has redefined sex in relation to the Equality Act,
Yep.
I can imagine there'll be attempts to look at what are the other laws that they could challenge next. So it's not easy, and all of this is going on whilst we've got a review of adult gender services as well, NHS England adult gender services going on, so working on that as well. But if I could say one thing to trans people, and this is something I've been saying a lot, but there's a wonderful woman in Kenya that I speak to called Vanilla, and Vanilla's a trans woman, and she runs a organization for trans refugees who've moved into Kenya, and Vanilla herself is Ugandan and became a refugee moving to Kenya as a result of the laws against LGBTQ plus people in Uganda. And what Vanilla said to me is, they can hate me, go ahead. They can make me illegal, go ahead. They can, they can beat me up, but it doesn't change who I am, and I'm going to keep being who I am. And that, that resilience and that determination to resist, I think, is an important thing for people to hold on to. And the laws that have been up till this point protecting trans people, only, the Gender Recognition Act is only 21 years old, and people had to have battle to get us to that point. And people like Stephen Whittle and Christine Burns were there at the time, as were many other people that are still active in the
And also not forgetting April Ashley as well.
Absolutely, April Ashley, who, yeah, if it wasn't for her ex-husband, we wouldn't have needed a Gender Recognition Act in the first place. But yeah, all of these people have gone through a lot and have survived
Yeah.
and thrived and persisted. So for the people that haven't had that struggle, just know that other people have survived it, and around the world where things are a different context that are surviving their own challenges. And the fact of the matter is trans people have always been here. We're here right now, and we're always going to be here, and no one can change that.
No, absolutely. And, speaking of puberty blockers and all of that, I'm in the process of trying to get Helen Rebellion on to discuss the current state of gender affirming care, where that's going to be heading to, which still baffles me, given that we still give puberty blockers to cis kids, but for some reason, oh no, we can't give it to trans people. But anyway, that'll be for that discussion, hopefully. I'd love to have Stephen Ritter on. Um, there's plenty of people I'd love to have on, but you know, I'll get to that bridge down the line. Um, I, from my perspective, I can foresee a lot of people leaving the UK to go elsewhere, where they're not going to be as impeded as they are here, because we only have to look at the US and what's happening over there, and sooner or later, it's gonna what's happening over there is gonna happen over here. So I can see a lot of people leaving. Um, yeah, but I fully, um, I 100% agree with you. The trans people aren't going anywhere. Whatever you throw at them, they're not going to leave. And if it wasn't for people like Steve Riddle, April Ashley, um, a trailblazer in her own right, um, you know, we are here to stay. And so, yeah, it's just, I was listening to, what was I watching? Oh, I was watching Sky News, Dawn Butler MP and a former Tory. Dawn was explaining the, trans women and trans men about the bathroom bill. And this former Tory completely stopped working because he couldn't compute and understand. And Dawn Butler said that one of the lesbian friends, a butch lesbian, was escorted out of a changing room and had to be escorted back in. And that's what you've created, because, okay, like, you can have your beliefs, that's fine. Right? Okay, if you want to believe, right, it's not correct, but if you want to believe that trans women aren't women, that's fine. You can have your beliefs. But when your beliefs impede on a minority, which, again, bears repeating, 1%, did absolutely nothing. They didn't speak, they didn't include any trans people to come and talk to at the hearing. None. So because so you've stopped, so you've taken away trans people's dignity. Well, you try to, but I think we'll bounce back stronger and more united, because, as you said, there's going to be more court cases, so more fighting. So those who stay will fight because you've taken their rights away, which you know they have always had. It completely like I say, we can do a forecast. So obviously a forecast, right? So more court cases. What else are they going to go for next? It's hard to tell given the current climate. So I guess it's just a wait and see moment. So, but in the meantime, trans people's healthcare is probably going to be at risk next, if it isn't already, given the state of the gender affirming care. Trans kids, like red. It, I, the reason why I'm struggling to find the words is because it's like, what more do they want?
They have
That's
started.
my
They have
question.
started to come out and say that they want all protection for trans people removed from the gender recognition, from the Equality Act. They've started to come out and say, where there's the puberty blocker trial, which people advocating for trans people have spoken out on, because it's unethical. The people that had previously been pushing for there's no evidence, etc., and now coming out and saying there shouldn't even be a trial. They're just trans under 18s shouldn't have any access to blockers. So they're starting to reveal themselves, and a lot of the people who the ones that feel like their job is done almost, they're starting to be a lot more openly racist and anti-migrant. We've seen a lot of that over the past sort of couple of weeks, sort of seeing these same people that have been speaking against trans rights now being a bit more obvious about speaking with anti-migrant rhetoric and with racist and particularly Islamophobic rhetoric. And if you look at the newspapers that carry transphobic articles, a lot of them also push anti-immigrant rhetoric and Islamophobic rhetoric. And if you look at what's going on in the States, it's all of that rhetoric is there as well. The only thing over in the UK yet is the attack on abortion rights is not yet quite so obvious. But I'll tell you what, if you look at which law firm does a lot of the cases around attempting to restrict trans healthcare and cases around trans rights that we wouldn't agree with them taking, they also take a lot of abortion related cases. And I'm, it's a podcast. I'm not going to say any more than that, just to point it out.
Yeah.
And people will draw their own conclusions either way. Is it a coincidence? But there's a lot of this rhetoric and though there are some people that have campaigned against trans people's rights that are horrified about anti-abortion rhetoric and Islamophobic and anti-migrant rhetoric. but they'd been happy until this came to the forefront. They'd been happy to go along and join up with the far right on this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely linked, and looking at where the money's coming into Europe, millions of pounds is coming into Europe from the States, from Russia, from weirdly from the Vatican. It's documented that there's sort of, or maybe not the money from the Vatican, but the shared strategies and the unfortunately for trans children, young people, they're seen as the easy option to attack first because it's very much think of the children, and because some parents like to think that they own their children as well, and that their children don't have bodily autonomy. You know.
Oh yeah, that chestnut. Yeah. On the abortion thing, because what you said is more than enough, and people can make their own conclusions and or even looking into it themselves. Um, all I'm going to say is, look what happened in the US with Roe versus Wade. That's what you need to know on that. On the abortion thing, that's what you need to know on that. So, just be aware that if they can take one group's rights away from them, just like that with a click of a finger, trust me, right? They might come after you, come after you next. Yeah, it's I do not, and I'm going to say this lightly. I do not envy the hard work that's going to face organizations like Transaxle and other organizations that are going to have a lot of hard work ahead of them. And I'm sure, obviously, you're going to be more than up to it, even though it's going to be a long, hard battle. It's going to be something that's worth fighting for, obviously. And I don't envy that task, but it is something that has to be done because otherwise, there's no end to. I'm going to use this word lightly because I don't want to be too hyperbolic, but the suffering will be a lot harder if action isn't taken to fight these bullshit court cases that are just basically trying to take away your rights, your dignity, your basic human rights away from you, or because they can't, in my words, not yours, so, or because they can't compute or understand that trans people exist. And so because they can't compute and it goes against their gender critical beliefs, they are basically having a meltdown, having a panic attack, and are reacting by taking away trans people's rights, all because they don't believe trans people exist.
It's also a very by now having got a definition
Yeah,
of the
now they're
Equality
going to
Act
run with it.
is of what whatever the Supreme Court have decided biological woman means. They've certainly not told us in the judgment, but they're what the court case essentially does is defines people by their body parts, and the body parts we're talking about, if you look at the language that Trump used, is talking about large gametes and small gametes. So it's coming down to people's ability to reproduce. That's what it's boiling people down to, and again, that goes very much into
Yeah, I
sort of
mean,
far right as well.
yeah, I mean, the judge. I mean, the judge didn't go this in depth, but the judge who presided over April Ashley's divorce pretty much said the same thing. Obviously that was back in 1970-ish. Um, but I mean, yeah. I mean, April Ashley ended up living her best life anyway. You know, obviously that was a different time, but you know, um, yeah, it's these people don't. Again, in my own words, these people don't know what the hell they're doing. But it's like that old adage: if you throw enough money at it, apparently money talks. And apparently, in this instance, it did. It got them what they wanted, but not really. But they,
Well, it depends. It depends what
well,
the
yeah,
motivation was. And I'm going to gently challenge you. The April Ashley court case had a more sensible understanding
oh yeah,
of biological sex because they actually spoke about the chromosomes and hormone profile and sort of genitals and other stuff as well. So actually, the court in the 1970s was showing a better understanding than certainly the court appears to have done, and certainly more than the government is showing.
yeah. Well, the thing is, the thing is, in that court case in the 1970s with April Ashley, um, the judge, um, the people who wrote the legal document to support April Ashley, the judge didn't actually like it, so he told them to write it again, more so it was more favourable in his views, I guess. And but yeah, at least they had a better understanding of biology back then.
It says something because that's before we'd even you think about how far science has come along, how far understanding of genetics and of of insects, people, and different ways of being intersex and how
Yeah,
it shows or doesn't show in people's life. There's we've got much more scientific understanding than they did then. It's just
yeah,
it's not being looked at. People are sort of acting as if what you learn in GCSE biology is the full picture.
yeah.
Even in GCSE biology, you learn about insects.
Yeah. Well, whenever I literally see a turf spouting biology, my go-to line is they're probably spouting primary school level biology because they don't seem to understand that biology is far more complex and nuanced than that. But that could be a different topic because you know personally I've got better things to do than trying to educate a turf when it's not going to make a difference. But yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, how is this going to affect trans women, trans men, intersex people as well who are non ambiguous? Because you know if they're going to check your genitalia, is which if we reached that point, and I'm saying if, then we have completely lost the fucking plot. And it's like, and you try and check a person, an intersex person, their genitalia. Do you know what you're going to look for? I highly doubt it because again, it's ambiguous. But yeah, I I know for damn sure I will be keeping a close eye on the next coming months I'll obviously keep tabs on Transaxle and other websites to because I want to stay up to date as possible. Um, I'm sure at some point my co-host will have her say, probably in next week's episode. Um, yeah, like I say, I'm glad she's not here because she would have probably had, excuse me, a meltdown, and this would have derailed considerably. But yeah, I'm just trying to think. So the long-term plan, obviously don't go into too much detail if you don't want to, because that's absolutely fine. But what is your interim to long-term plan going forward?
We're going to any rights that trans people have lost, we're going to be fighting to get them back, and we're going to defending the rights that we do still have. And then in other parts of our work, we're going to continue. We're not going to let this stop us and distract us from the other parts of our work that we're doing as well. So we're still going to be fighting for trans people's healthcare and improvements on that. We're still going to be educating healthcare providers. We're still going to be providing info for trans people on healthcare and other stuff like that. But it's the next few weeks looks like a lot of talking with other organisations, make talking with politicians, the ones that will listen, and seeing what it is that needs to happen to start fixing what's been broken.
Is there a specific angle you'll take? Like, actually, let me rephrase that question because I was a bit stupid. Um, What would you be wanting to tackle first in terms of trans rights, or is it just basically you want to attack and try and defend as many as you can?
Well, first, it depends what happens, in
Mm.
short. But first things first, it's getting that clarity over where we all stand at the moment, and um, in simultaneously pushing for our rights to be fully restored, whilst also making sure that there aren't opportunities for things to get worse. So in terms of priority, it's things are changing week on week at the moment. There's something new coming out every week, and there had been before the Supreme Court. To be fair, we already had a lot of stuff we were working on. So yeah, hard to say because it's changing so quick.
Right. Yeah. Um. Yeah. I was kind of thinking to myself. As I was asking that question. Like, that's pretty stupid because you already said that it depends. So yeah, that was pointless for me. Um. So yeah, I mean, yeah, like I say, I will put all the obviously our link transactional down below, all of your links, um, and the press statement down below. Um, I'll try and put resources down below as well, helplines, if I can find some that are relevant. Um, and yeah, we I'd love to. Obviously, I will give it some airtime, probably a few months or so. But I'd love to have you back on to see where you are or to see what else has happened in the meantime. But as I say, I don't envy you, but I don't envy all the hard work that you have in front of you. But you have obviously all of the support of the community, obviously, and this will be the year that we make a stand and we charge ahead. So yeah, I want to thank you for coming on. Um, Thank you for obviously making time in your schedule, and yeah, that'll be that. So yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. Do make sure to obviously whatever everything that me and Chay have like obviously spoken about, anything on note Chay has said, do by all means do your own research, looking into what he said, educate yourself on the topic, um, keep yourself up to date on everything you need to know. If you are thinking of leaving the UK, then obviously do make sure you look into the relevant information you need. Basically, arm yourself with the facts. Make sure you know where you stand. Um, and finally, um, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but how has this ruling affected you on a personal level?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. On a personal level, it's yeah, it's I'm been as confused and as scared as anyone else, and it has taken a toll, just as doing this work takes a toll, but it's work at the same time that I'm privileged to be able to do for our community. So yeah, onwards and upwards. I hope.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a I mean, it's a blessing in a way, given that you have your work to focus on, so that keeps you busy. So yeah, but yeah, thank you for coming on. Again, I'll put all the links down below. Um, so yeah, that will be it for tonight. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and your weekend, and hope to have you back on in 6 months or so. Um, so yeah, I will let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too.
See
Bye.
you. Bye. Bye.
Oops. Right. Let me